Welcome to Transcendence Cinema. Welcome back to Transcendence Cinema. I'm your host, Greg Durrance, and with me is...
Victor Martin.
And you chose Sans Soleil? Well, I don't know how to say this.
Let me bring out the French.
I
Soleil.
Yeah. I heard somebody say it, and I was like, oh, that's how you say it, and then completely forgot. So, anyway.
Literally.
Director...
Or we could just say sunless.
So, yeah, there you go. Because that's what my wife did. She's like, what movie are you and Victor doing? And I was like, oh, it's Sans Soleil. She's like, oh, without sun. I was like, yes.
Yep.
Chris Marker, which I just realized he wrote 12 Monkeys, which is amazing.
12 Monkeys. I've not seen that.
You have not seen 12 Monkeys?
No, I don't think I've heard of it.
12 Monkeys with Bruce Willis. You have to check it out.
Oh,
it's so good.
Is that a Terry Gilliam film?
Yes, Terry Gilliam directed it, and it is... I love that movie.
Oh, now I'm even more curious. That's awesome.
Yeah. But that's the only thing I recognize from his filmography. So I'm not well versed in his work.
Sure.
So what made you want to pick this one?
Well, I have a hard time picking a film every single time. And this is one I wanted to watch for a while just because, I don't know, everyone praises it. It's got an interesting synopsis. And I like films that sort of deal with other cultures, and especially if they're filmed in a completely different decade. That always fascinates me.
Definitely.
And just hearing, like, reading other people's reviews on it, I was just like, well, this seems very interesting. It seems like it would bring out a good discussion, and that's kind of what led me to choose this.
Yeah, it is. You have a niche. You love experimental filmmaking, I've realized.
Yeah, this is true.
And I'm into it because it opens up a door that I didn't even know I needed open for myself. So I appreciate that.
Amazing to hear. Yeah, dude, of course.
So yeah, it's a mixture of a bunch of things. It's a travel documentary, it's poetry, it's a lot of things.
It's also fiction, which surprised me. That the characters aren't real.
Oh. Yeah, that is pretty surprising. I didn't think about that.
No, I read that and I was like, oh, okay, so it's like hybrid fiction documentary.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, even if you didn't know that, it wouldn't really necessarily like ruin the magic of it, I guess.
Yeah, I was listening to somebody talk about it, and they're like, apparently he used stock footage. I'm like, there is a stock footage of a spaceship releasing one of its containers. Do you think he was on that spaceship and got that footage? Of course he used stock
Chris
footage.
was in space. What a ding dong.
So yeah, it was a super interesting watch. I didn't know what I was in for. I really didn't. It's one of those movies that takes a minute to like get your brain right for it, I guess.
Oh my god.
Like, what am I watching? Like, what are we doing here? And then it finally settled in, probably about 20 minutes in. I settled into it and I was like hypnotized, is like the best way I can put it. And I was completely drawn into this movie, and I was like, I don't want to say I get it, but for me experiencing it, I'm like, I like this. It's nice.
Good. I'm glad. And you talking about taking a bit to really get into the groove of it, I felt the exact same. I almost sort of thought to myself, like, damn, I hope this wasn't a mistake. Like, I hope that we can each at least comprehend. I mean, the thing about narration, and especially when it delves into philosophy and just, I don't want to say pretentious, but it has an air of pretentiousness to it, and overanalyzation of like the simplest images.
Yeah, it can, but I was accepting of it. I was like, I get it, you're being all deep and stuff right now, but I'm witnessing someone else's experience of this experience of this moment, you know?
Absolutely. And I guess I'm more saying like that took me a second to get used to.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
At first, I was like, "Is he just telling me about the things?" And then I started to pick up on the poetry parts of it, aspects of it. I'm like, "Oh,
mhm.
he's doing, like, poetry readings of his experiences." So,
Right.
once I realized that, I was like, "Oh, okay, I get it."
Mm,
Um, I thoroughly enjoyed this film, and, it did something that I was thinking about. My wife and I were talking about how we want to travel around the world, right? But when you're talking about traveling, you're really, like, focused on monuments, right? Like, "Oh, I wanna go
yeah.
see this monument. I wanna go see this." But this film focused on the people,
Yeah.
and I noticed that, and I was like, "Oh, he's really, like, getting to the grain of the culture of these people." Like, not just things that they've built or anything like that. It's like, how are they as a culture? And I found it super fascinating, and I just Um, do you ever people watch? Like, just kinda sit back and just kinda watch people just live their life, and you're like, just a bunch of little ants.
Yes, 100%. That's
Yeah.
like one of my favorite things to do because it's like, especially when you've lived in a place for, a quite a long time, there's not like a whole lot that stands out anymore. I mean,
Right.
you could focus on like, the beauty of nature and all of that, but it still can kind of not do a whole lot for
Mhm.
someone and like for me sometimes. So watching people and seeing like the just the little minute details of life, um, I get a lot of joy out of that.
Yeah, and I felt like this is what the traveling documentary was doing for me, is like, when you do go to a new place, like you were talking about, like, you're so in awe of maybe structures and stuff like that, you don't
Mhm.
even pay attention to the people.
Right.
Like, I go to Chicago, the last thing I'm looking at are the people around me,
Sure.
but this film, like, focusing in on the people, I found it so interesting. It's, like, forcing you to see them as people and their culture and everything, and I don't know, that's just something I really picked up on and I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and that's something that I feel like personally that I would be really drawn to if I was to visit, another country. It's
Mhm.
because like of course the obvious landmarks and whatnot are beautiful, but it's not what makes a place.
Right,
Um,
100%.
and so to see like people, like when they were showing scenes in Japan, like performing rituals, sort of like, or more so like ceremonies and prayers, um, you know, all these little tradition pieces of
Mhm.
tradition, I think is just so amazing to see. And I'm glad this film kind of, like you said, just tapped into that mostly because it's
Yes.
very important.
Yes, very much so. Um, Another thing I picked up on, he does a lot of talking about like memories and the past and stuff like that, and it made me think how like fleeting life is.
Yeah,
There's one quote I just had it pulled up. Oh, it says, "Who remembers all that? History throws its empty bottles out the window." I loved that line.
for
I was
sure.
like, it's so on the nose. Like we have these moments and we can remember stuff. We try to remember stuff, but in the end, most of it's forgotten. And it's something that I've really been thinking about lately is just being in the moment and enjoying the present. Like I hear people talk about the future, the things they want to do for the future, all the savings they have that they're going to be doing with it. And I'm like, what about
Hmm.
right now? What are you
Yeah,
doing right now?
it's
Because
like
that's
brother. The
important.
only, yeah, exactly. The only thing that's
And
real is now.
yeah, exactly. And that's one thing that this movie kind of tapped in for me was enjoy these moments, like these people having these celebrations like this and now. This is important. It doesn't matter what you remember from this. It's being in this moment.
Right, because even memories are sort of inherently incorrect, or especially over time, they degrade.
And they
And
change and they're never exactly what they were.
right, so you know, memories serve a purpose, but at the same time, after a certain point, it's like, well, is this any more real than a false memory, and
Yeah.
it's just so there's definitely a lot of memory talk in here, and that
Mhm.
sort of stuff, like, kind of ironic that I was so kind of swept up in it that afterwards I've sort of forgotten a lot of what was said and just sort of remembering images and sounds. I don't know. I don't know how
Yeah,
to describe it, but it's a weird little bit of
somebody,
ironic there.
it's actually funny. I was trying to listen to a podcast of people talking about this film,
Mhm.
and their guest host was the director of the first film I think we did. Oh, what was it called? The Carnival World's Fair.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
so she was on the podcast and talking about this movie. I was at work, so I didn't have a chance to listen to all of it.
Mhm.
But I forgot where I was going with that. But but I just
So
thought it was funny that a movie you picked, she was talking about this
I
one
didn't
in
even know that
particular.
she was on a podcast talking about that.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
it was pretty cool. And what else? Oh, you were talking about the sounds. I love the transitions in this movie, like between places. There are these moments of like, I don't know how to say it, trippy, almost like drug like music, sounds,
Oh, sure.
and visuals, and I loved it. It just sucked me into it even more.
Yeah, because there's some of those sounds that they used were almost like sci-fi,
Mhm.
and so it almost like even though it was focusing on the mundane images, like just mundane scenes, it like
Yeah.
almost felt alienating in a sense.
Mhm.
Like this doesn't feel from Earth. Um,
Yeah, right. And this came out in '83, so it was like way before its time, like music or sound wise.
right. It's so awesome to see a film from. I mean, obviously, experimental cinema goes way back, but just to see it in places I guess you don't really expect in terms
Mhm.
of like the visuals or the sound. I also loved the. I think you were talking about more of like the trippy visuals, like when that guy's using his like video synthesizer
Yeah.
to kind of show the traveler his images, but in this sort of digital frame. I don't know. There
Mhm.
was there was a whole discussion about that in the film that I really enjoyed, but of course I'm forgetting exactly what was said.
Oh, but that's what the reason I brought up the podcast is that's what they were saying. They're like, this is a movie. After you watch it, you don't remember what you watched.
Fucking true. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah, so that's why I brought that up. Okay, thank you for bringing that back. But yeah, same. Like I know there was so much I liked about this movie, but I know I'm missing most of it in my brain. And even though I have like the narration pulled up, I'm just like cherry picking
Right. So
or
this is
the
a film
things
I
that I
definitely wish I had subtitles with. I was thinking about it, but I was like, I might just focus too much on the subtitles and miss the images. But now I'm wishing that I did turn them on
yeah,
because
there's a couple of times I was glad I had them on.
I feel like words sort of stick better. I don't know about you, but like when I see the words written out, I'm like, I can almost absorb that a bit better.
It's a funny phenomenon that's been happening to me, and I used
Oh,
to be anti subtitle. I was like, do not put subtitles on my movie and ruin my experience. But the wife is a subtitle person. She's like,
oh.
"Can I please just have the subtitles? Like,
Hmm.
you'll be fine, you'll get over it." And I'm like, "Yeah, put on your subtitles." But I noticed after a while, I did have that connection that you're talking about. Like, even
Okay.
though it's in English, even though it's a language I understand, reading it and hearing it, it just like there's another layer of cementing it in my brain.
Absolutely, dude.
So
I
yes, 100% get that.
yeah, I can't remember the exact scene, but they were showing. It was about damn. Let me try to remember. It was people protesting um like the construction of an airstrip, I think, of an
Hmm.
airport,
Right.
and showing the how even in the 60s and in the present, how those two images were like exactly the same,
Yeah.
and how using that video synthesizer almost like that one person was using to show like when you remove the context in a sense, it's just like, I don't know, it sort of loses a place in time, and it's just, it is what it is. It's just like it loses subjectiveness.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that part, but I might be misremembering it. But
no, I know what part you're talking about. I just it's one of those ones that skipped over me, so I'm not
right, for sure.
remembering it well either.
But I think he did a lot of cool like match cuts like that, where I think he was talking about a certain leader in one of the African countries, and there's certain like scenes, like archival scenes that he used or footage to the footage he shot, and the way he cut between them was like a perfect, seamless connection. I don't know, the moments
Yep.
like that I was just fascinated by.
When you're just watching the movie, you're like, God, this is just a bunch of nonsense. But if you're like really paying attention, this thing is masterfully put together. The fact that he
Yes.
had all this footage, trimmed it down to an hour and 44 minutes, and it's just so masterfully done. Like every shot feels like it has purpose. And that's where I was like, I don't feel like this is chaos. I feel like there's order to this.
Absolutely. And that's where it's almost like hard to comprehend it all, because it's like with chaos you just sort of accept it as that, but this is so dense with meaning that it just like takes extra work to like comprehend it.
I told the wife, she's like, so what'd you think of it? I'm like, I loved it, but I need a couple more passes. Like I need
Yeah,
to watch it a couple more times to really like take in everything.
I 100% agree.
I liked his Vertigo references and like almost like history repeating itself, like you were talking about, like the similar. These two events are happening, but they're basically, you take out the context, it's kind of like the same things happening.
Right.
Oh, I was trying to look for one because there was that one moment that kind of, I mean, I think it sticks out for everybody. He was filming, I forgot exactly where he was, but he was filming women on the street, and a lot of them did not want to be filmed. They would like cover their face or look away or anything.
Yeah.
But there was a moment he was filming a lady, and she looked at him for 24 frames, like 1 second,
Yeah.
and
I
then
liked that
looked
reference.
away. And then he's like, in that moment, we shared that connection. She knew she was being watched. I knew, or you know what I'm trying to say.
Right. Right.
And I thought that was a nice little addition, like that moment, that human connection.
Exactly.
So
Sorry.
you're good. Is there anything else you got from this that we haven't spoke on yet?
um God, I don't know. I'm struggling to piece any sort of coherent thought together.
You're good.
I don't know, man. I was just sort of hypnotized by it, and
But you didn't enjoy it though, like overall.
oh, absolutely, yeah. It's. I think I'm on the same boat with you, where I would need to see it at least, a few more times to really kind of grasp it. But
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those films for me where it's just more something to experience, and talking about it just feels, I don't want to say like pointless, but I don't know. Like, what do you say?
Exactly. It's one of those. It's like you go to, let's say you go to an art museum and you're looking at a painting and you see one that moves you, and somebody asks you like, what is it about this painting that moves you? And it's like, I can't really put it into words. It just affects me, and I can't really tell you how or why that is. And it's kind of like what this movie is.
Absolutely, yeah, agreed. It's just sort of like even a question as simple as like, how was your day? It's like, buddy, there's like a million details. There's so many different little things that I can't even begin to describe. And
Right.
that's just sort of like life. This is what that kind of reminded me of. Is just the little details of life, the random thoughts, the people that you meet. It's just very human, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah, I like something you said. You're like, it's an experience.
Yeah.
After I watched the movie, I was thinking about something because when we first started this podcast, it's called Transcendent Cinema, and I did a little intro, and you mentioned something. You're like, oh, I expected something more than just the title. And it's kind
Mhm.
of been like I've been thinking about it ever since you said it, and I was like, what would I put? Like, I'm not really sure what I would put. And while watching this movie, I'm like, I know what I would put if I was to redo it or add to it. But
Uh-huh.
like, they're not just movies, they're experiences. And that's what I
Yeah,
feel like what the kind of movies we do on this. Like even the one we just did, Enter the Void. It's not a
right.
movie, that's an experience.
And that's the very essence of transcendent cinema.
Yeah,
Goes
definitely.
beyond the screen.
Right, exactly.
I guess each film we should do now is, does it get a transcendence pass? Does it transcend the screen? I would say Sunless definitely does.
100% does.
Did you have
Um,
any more to talk about the film? Anything else?
I had so much like I knew I should have written some of it down, but um I think I want to go over it a couple more times like to watch it and really like I think it's one of the have you ever seen Synecdoche, New York?
Yes.
Every time I watch that film, I get like a different experience. Like it affects me in a different way. And I have a feeling this movie's going to do the same thing.
Agreed. Yeah,
Like
I
every
could
time
see
I
that.
watch it, I'm going to get something different from it. Like right this time I watched it was definitely the people watching and being in the moment and appreciating where you are in the world in time. And I'm sure I'll get. There was a lot of stuff about death, by the way. That giraffe
Absolutely.
scene
Oh man,
was so hard to watch.
that sort of picked me up out of my hypnotized
Yeah,
slumber state.
I think he did it on purpose, like, "Hey, wake up," kind of thing, like, because he does talk about death a lot. There is a lot of death, but
Yes.
I death hasn't really been on my mind lately, so I didn't really, you know, look into those too much. Like, death is never really it's kind of there. I know it's inevitable, so I don't think about it. I
Right.
can't change it. I can't avoid it, so I don't let it enter my psyche.
Yeah, that's fair. But I like though when he was talking about kind of the difference between like Japanese culture versus like Western, how they were. He described it as like they were looking through the partition between life and death, and
Mhm.
almost with a sense of curiosity. Whereas with us, it's very like kind of how you described, like I know it's coming. I don't want to think about it. Like I don't want to look at it in the face.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I think while as hard as it was to watch, it was sort of just like a, hey, here you go. Like
Right.
you want to take a look at death? Here you go. Boom.
Can't avoid it. And I think it's like part of like it's always there and you're never going to avoid it. And sometimes you have to
Right.
face it.
Sometimes you're gonna have to be shown a giraffe being killed and then shot in the head,
And then its eyes eaten out by vultures
and then
because reasons.
right.
Um there was one part that really like I don't know why. I can't even explain why it like hit me to the core.
Mhm.
But I'm paraphrasing, but he's basically like some people are so privileged that they have the choice to live in poverty. Others don't have such a choice. And I'm like,
Yeah.
fuck. I was like, fuck, that like hits hard. Because you have all these like hipsters. I for lack of a better term, I'm just gonna use hipsters,
Mhm.
that they are so privileged that they get to live in poverty as they choose. Some
Sure.
people are raised in poverty. That is their life. And you're making a mockery of it by I wouldn't say a mockery, but you know, to a certain extent you are.
Yeah, it
Like
definitely
you
feels gross.
yeah, like you have the opportunity to live a good life and you're going to choose not to. I mean, that's your prerogative. That's your life. You can do what you want. But it's almost insulting to some I would assume it's insulting to some people.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think that was when he was talking about someone from the future
Mhm.
visiting Earth and sort of seeing how, I think what was it, like that happiness wasn't like an automatic thing, that there was sadness in the world,
Mhm.
and like yeah, and being privileged enough to be able to choose one or the other.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
but yeah, um, Shoot, I'm at a loss for words.
Yeah, right. Um, I don't remember when this one came up, but I read this quote that I was like, "Ooh, I want to go back and rewatch it so I can know what he was the context of this one." But it says, "As far as students, some massacred each other in the mountains in the name of revolutionary purity, while others had studied capitalism so thoroughly to fight it that that they now provide it at its best executives."
Right. Yeah.
With its best executives. I'm so sorry, I can't read.
You're fine. No, I love that quote. That was the irony in that.
Mhm. Um, so are we doing transcendence scores now?
If you like, I think that'd be kind of funny.
Yeah, right. It definitely transcends.
It transcends.
Yeah.
Do you still want to give it like a normal rating or?
Mm, sure, why not? Let's give it a rate. That's one thing that I think that it transcends works better because this kind of movie, how do you rate this?
That's a
Like, is it
great
a good
point.
movie? No, it's not a great movie. Is it a good art piece? Yes, it's an amazing art piece.
You're right. I think that's a great point. I think maybe we should just stick to the transcend score, and maybe like you give it a few notes if you slightly don't think it is or you think it is. I think that would be a more appropriate way to approach that.
I think so too, because like even Enter the Void, it's like I was having trouble rating it. I was like,
Right.
how do you rate this? Like, I loved it, but against the greatest films of the world doesn't match up. It's like it's not the same. It's like apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree.
but yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I didn't know what I was getting into, but I was thinking about this too. So the reason I started War with Cinema is I feel like I've said this now. I'm having deja vu. Is I wanted to use it to challenge Nick with movies,
Right.
like using more like independent films and lesser known movies. And I feel like you're digging a little bit deeper and finding those movies that are challenging me.
Yeah, without even knowing.
Yeah, without even knowing. And I really dig it. I'm into it because
Well, I mean, it was
when
yeah.
I say I'm like into independent films, I'm more so like popular independent films, but
Sure.
you get into like the nitty gritty of indie films.
Oh, buddy, I have a list. I mean, it was either this or a 4 hour, almost 5 hour art house film. So
Yeah, when
yeah.
I did the Tarkovsky, we were gonna do the Tarkovsky film. I sat down to watch it. I'm like, I have to dedicate half my day to this movie.
You've got some homework to do.
Yeah, and then after watching it, I was like, I'm too dumb for this movie to talk about. Like it's smarter than I am. And I wouldn't do it any justice trying to talk about it.
And that's how I feel with this movie too. It's like I don't even like everything in this. Like I don't even want to say I'm smarter than it, or it's kind of like those people in the bar in
Mhm.
Tokyo where everyone is at the same level and everyone knows it. It's like it almost sort of humbles you in a sense.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah,
think
definitely.
that's an experience that if a film does that, oh, it transcends.
100%. Well, well, I came across a list
Mhm.
and it had a movie on it that I was like, I want to do this on Transcendent Cinema. It may not transcend, but you keep giving me these like experimental films, and I
Mhm.
want to dive more into that. So I came across a movie called Skinamarink, and apparently you've
Oh
heard of
yeah.
it.
Yes.
Um, so the list was movies that tricked you into thinking they were good, and
Nice.
it was on there, and I was like, that's
Okay.
odd. But he also had Alita Battle Angel, which I'm very offended
Oh,
by.
come on. That movie's great.
I love that movie, and how dare him talk shit about it.
Absolutely.
So I figured it's the same thing with Skinamarink. He may be out of his element because it looks interesting.
Yeah, I've that one is seems very interesting to me, especially considering how divisive it is.
Is it
Um,
divisive?
oh, it's very divisive.
Mm.
Um, I think, but I'm super interested about it. I enjoy that sort of weirdo niche online horror stuff.
Yeah, it
Um,
really reminded me of World's Fair. Welcome to the World's Fair.
yes, I think it's. I think they describe it as like liminal horror. Kind of the thing right now is like liminal horror, like internet, um, like YouTube horror stuff. I don't know if
Oh,
you've
kind of
like
like
looked into any of
creep.
that.
I have, but some of it's kind of lame.
Yeah, it's
Creepypasta.
well, if you look up like liminal horror, there's like few different like big channels. Obviously like the back rooms. There's a few different channels I'm forgetting the name of, but it's very. I don't know. The horror is in like the subtleness or the unknown, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Um.
I'm very curious about how that one works, essentially.
Yeah, I had friends talking about this like years and years ago. They wanted to be filmmakers and stuff like that, and they were really into horror. And they would film stuff out in the woods, like figures standing almost out of focus. And
Hmm.
he's like, "That's the part that scares you, like not knowing what it is." He's like, "That's what real horror is." Like the so he was
Yeah,
definitely really into stuff like that. We lost touch after a while, but he
because
really tried to show me what real horror was.
I mean, I agree with that a bit, especially when I like would used to play like old horror games, or even now games that like adopt like a certain aesthetic, like a old PlayStation One style. It's like, but he's right, like the out of focus, the sort of low polygon, the whatever it is that sort of casts sort of veil around the
Mhm.
quote unquote horror. Yeah, I think that's super smart, and that's awesome that people figured out that that's like a really effective way to scare someone. So I'm excited for Skinamarink. I hope it doesn't trick us into thinking it's good when it's actually shit.
I know, right? I probably won't do it on the podcast, but I can give you a recommendation if you haven't seen it.
Sure.
Mungo Lake
Lake Mungo.
Mungo.
Oh yeah.
You've seen it?
Oh, that one's great.
I kind of figured you have already seen it, so
Yes.
but that one was highly recommended to me, and it's definitely what you're talking about.
Yeah, I remember when I tried to watch it for the first time alone with headphones
Mhm.
on. I was like, I got like I think 15 minutes in, and I was like, I can't. This is this is too spooky.
Really?
Yes, that's like one of the only films I've ever like felt that with. Especially
Wow.
like in my late 20s, I was like, I was like, I'm gonna wait to like finish this at some point. I don't know why. It felt too real, and I don't hate. It just scares me a lot when like digital and horror and just the indecipherable, like I already kind of mentioned, that stuff just spooks me out. I don't like seeing old photographs of like a supposed ghost or shitty cell phone footage of a fucking spirit. Like, ugh. Don't know why. That just gets my goat.
That's pretty funny. I never knew that. That's super interesting. Yeah, I started watching it and I looked it up because they portray it as like a real story, and of course
Mhm.
I have to be Captain Buzzkill, and I'm like, "Is Lake Mungo real?" No, it's not
Right.
real. Well, and it kind of like took all the wind out of my sail. So,
That's fair. I mean, I'm sure that's how
but
people felt when Blair Witch was like came out, and people are like, "Oh, this is fake, shitty."
yeah, but they did a good job with it because it freaked me out. Even though I know Blair Witch is fake, because I was there at the hype,
Yeah.
and it is kind of freaky. I don't
Oh
know if
yeah.
it aged well for people. Like, um, they knew the story before they saw the movie,
Mhm.
so when they go to watch it, it doesn't have the same effect. So I don't know if it ages like that.
I gotta say
But
that probably the only way to watch it these days is to pop it into like a VHS player
mhm.
and watch it that way. Otherwise, if you're watching it on like Blu-ray, it loses that feeling, that like homemade, this is real.
Mhm.
So you have to build a treehouse, and you have to be in the forest alone. You have to pop into a VHS player and sit alone in their dark treehouse. That's how you watch it.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want to do that at all. Um, but yeah, so I guess we're gonna do Skinamarink next whenever we get together again.
Sounds good. Hopefully, it's easier to talk about.
I'm sure it will be. I'm gonna give this one a couple more passes. I'm gonna watch it a few more times because I really enjoyed it. So
I agree. Luckily, it's not long either, so
yeah,
that's a plus.
yeah, it's not 4 hours. So, but that's all I have. Do you have anything else?
No, I'm good. Good movie. Definitely recommend it.
Yeah, it transcends. But I guess we'll see you later, guys.
Bye bye.